Hey guys, how you doing? Luna here with a new video. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm really happy and really excited because we're going to be ranking the songs from one of my favorite albums of all time. Actually, out of the Beatles discography, this is probably the album I've heard the most, and that is Rubber Soul, released in 1965. In my opinion, the most important album in the band's discography, mainly because it was the album that showed people that the Beatles were more than just a pop rock band, that it was more than just a trend. They were here to change music, and they were doing it by implementing a lot of different elements like psychedelia, baroque, folk rock music, and pop into one single sound, and that is the sound of Rubber Soul. Obviously, because this is one of the greatest albums ever made, ranking the songs from worst to best was really difficult, so there's a few rules I want to set so you guys understand the metrics that were used to rank the songs in this album, okay? First of all, we're going to be ranking the songs in this list not only based on their performance as a standalone track, but also how they helped the album achieve the sound it achieved. Also, we're going to be including the singles released in support of this album so we can work it out, and Day Tripper are also going to be ranked in this list. That means we have 16 songs to go through, and I have to remind you guys, I say it every time, but this is only my personal opinion, my personal way of ranking the songs in this album. I know that for a lot of you, some songs are going to be more important than others because everyone has a different experience with each song, so please, instead of complaining, instead of insulting in the comment section, leave your own list down below so we can all see it. I'll take a look and I'll give you my opinion on your list, and we can have a small conversation in the comments section. With that being said, we do have 16 songs to go through, and I don't really want this video to be that long, so let's go on with number 16. And I'm pretty sure that we all knew that What Goes On was gonna be a number 16, not because it's Ringo, okay? I like Ringo's voice sometimes when it's a little playful and when he doesn't take himself that seriously. He manages to pull off a nice tune like it happens in Yellow Submarine, Octopus's Garden, or With a Little Help of My Friends. But in this particular song, I think that Ringo is trying to mimic the performance by the rest of the band, and it doesn't really sound that good, especially when he tries to hold a note for too long and he doesn't add vibrato or any sort of voice effect to it. You know, it's pretty clear that the band didn't put that much effort into the recording and production of this song. And the guitar playing in here is a mess. The percussion is not that interesting, even though Ringo Starr is the drummer, so I don't really know why more effort wasn't put into the instrumentation of the song, because usually when it comes to Ringo, that's the part that that's the catch. The instrumentation is usually what you pay attention to, because Ringo is not really such a compelling performer, so that's the reason why it falls in number 16. At number 15, we have the first song that was recorded for this album, and that's Run For Your Life, written by John Lennon. The reason why this song is so low, in terms of quality, this is way better than What Goes On. Actually, I will say it right away, every single song starting from now on, it's great. It's a great piece of music, but it's still really low on the list, and I think that the main reason for that is that, this folky type of instrumentation doesn't really match the energy of Rubber Soul. In my opinion, the fact that it was the last track when you had so many songs here like Wait, like Girl, Nowhere Man, or In My Life were better songs or better options to close the album. Instead, they decided to use this one. The lyrics are also kind of creepy. I know that that's sort of like the point. John Lennon's lyricism was going in interesting directions during this entire project, so it's not surprising that he would write a song like this, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it's really creepy. Other than that, it's a really good song. Again, like every song in here is great, but compared to some of the other songs here, it's clearly not the greatest. Now, this is where it starts to get really difficult for me, because at 14, I have to put Think For Yourself by George Harrison. The reason why I don't really want to do it is because this song is actually really interesting. The way that the vocal harmonies are used to accentuate certain points of the track, the fuzz bass that Paul McCartney plays in this song. George Harrison's lyricism is really interesting and philosophical in this track. It shows that the Beatles were maturing, not only in terms of, the recording techniques that were used throughout the album, but also the lyrics that they used for the songs in here. So it hurts me to put this song so low on the list, but other songs in this album have much more interesting instrumentation, managed to express what they want to express with the lyrics in a much shorter amount of time, but it's still an amazing track, and it's one of the most important moments in the album because it shows the type of instrumentation that's going to be showcased throughout the whole listen. You know, I feel like that is the reason why Rubber Soul had such an effective first half, because it has most of the tracks that show the difference between this album and the previous ones in the very first tracks, you know. So number 14, great track. One of the most remarkable things about Rubber Soul and the way that it sounds is how vocal harmonies are used to accentuate certain parts of the song. Not necessarily the chorus, not necessarily because the lyrics need to be accentuated, it's just to offer a different tempo or a change of pace in the verse of the song, you know, that keeps the songs interesting. And that is the reason why The Word finds itself at number 13. I don't think that the instrumentation on this track is as interesting as the one in Think for Yourself or even Run for Your Life, but again, the use of vocal harmonies and backing vocals to accentuate certain parts of the melody is what brings this song all the way up to number 13. Other than that, I don't really think that the lyrics are that interesting. You know, it's very simple, and the instrumentation, once again, is very simple too, but that detail with the vocal harmonies is what makes this track so amazing. It kind of offers that psychedelic element that people use when they want to reference this album as one of the earliest examples of psychedelic rock music. You know, it's clear that psychedelic music has other elements that are way more obvious than the ones showcased in this song, but still you can hear the psychedelia peeking through certain moments in this song, like the chorus, for example, or the little falsetto run they do at a certain point of the song. There's a lot of things that kind of make me want to put this song higher, but because of the simplicity of the instrumentation, I can't really do it. At number 12, we have another Paul McCartney song, and that is I'm Looking Through You. This is a really interesting song, especially when you look at the lyrics, mainly because a lot of the songs in this album are references to Paul McCartney's relationship with Jane Asher that wasn't really at a good point, and this is the perfect example. When you look at the lyrics, is Paul trying to understand Jane and trying to get what's wrong with their relationship, but he's not able to do it. You know, he sees that there's a problem, and he sees that she's not the same, but can't really explain why. The instrumentation, you know, with the clapping and the guitar going crazy after the verse is finished, you know, add a little playful nature to the song that makes it a bit more interesting than The Word, even if the instrumentation itself, you know, the way the guitars are played, the percussion is not as interesting as The Word and Think for Yourself. Again, the playful nature along with Paul McCartney's performance in here, you know, the fact that he's able to belt vocals and offer some really powerful raspy moments without sacrificing the melodic nature of the song is one of the main reasons why I personally see Paul McCartney as the greatest genius in terms of melody in the history of music, you know. So number 12, really good song. At number 11, we have another Paul McCartney song with You Won't See Me. And before anyone says anything, I'm fully aware that a lot of the songs here were written by Lennon and McCartney together as a partnership. I know that, and I know that I shouldn't be saying this is a Paul McCartney song, but most of the times with a lot of the songs you'll find in this album, one had 80% of the song ready, and then the other one added something to the middle 8, or maybe a few details in the chorus, or changed a few lyrics. You know, it's pretty clear by the nature of the song, its lyrics, and the way the melody works, who wrote the track, and in this case it's Paul McCartney all the way, because the melodies, the way that the vocals kind of offer another layer to the instrumentation, the backing vocals that is. This is yet another song that kind of depicts the moment that his relationship with Jane Asher was at, so it's really interesting to see that too. Oh, I will say that the instrumentation, once again, is not really that interesting compared to some of the other songs, because instrumentation was a really big part of the reason why you know, this album was so praised by the critics. You know, it seems like they were taking pop rock music in a totally different direction, and also new recording techniques and new instruments were being added to the studio. So even if the instrumentation in here is amazing, I don't think it represents or that it shows the reason why Rubber Soul is such a legendary album, you know. So I would like to put this song higher because I think the dynamic of the vocals between John, Paul, and George is really cool, but honestly a lot of the compositions that come a little further down the list are way more interesting than this one, so it falls in number 11. Cracking up the top 10, we have the track Wait, and a lot of the things that I said about You Won't See Me apply to this one. The main catch of the song would be the dynamics between John and Paul in the vocals of the song. I think it's really interesting. It sounds really good. It's songs like these that inspired people like Brian Wilson to make Pet Sounds, which is one of the greatest albums ever made. So not only is this track amazing, but it's also really important. But I feel like I should put this song a little higher than You Won't See Me, mainly because of the guitar playing and the in the bridge of the song. They change the tempo, they make everything a little faster. It's like a dream sequence. It sounds really good, and it adds another layer of complexity to the instrumentation of this album that makes the whole listen an overall better experience. Okay, so Wait is a really similar song to You Won't See Me, just a little faster pace, the instrumentation being a little more thin, a little more simple, but once it goes deep into the instrumental passages, that's when the song really shines, and that's when the melody gets really, really good. Actually, I would say that part in the chorus, you know, it's one of my favorite musical passages out of the first half of the band's discography. Okay, so really good song, number 10. This is where it gets really hard for me, because putting Drive My Car at number 9 feels wrong. I've heard this song so much. Actually, if it weren't for another song on this list that I will be talking about in a minute, this would be the song I've heard the most out of this entire album. I love the little details in the instrumentation, like the piano playing, the guitar, you know, the opening riff, or the hand clapping, the cowbell, adding an extra layer of funny little details to the instrumentation that makes the song feel like it feels so similar to a lot of the Beatlemania albums, but has little details, little elements, little sparks of genius that make the whole experience something new and something different. And you know, this flavorful additions to the instrumentation is what brings Drive My Car all the way up to number 9. You know, obviously Paul McCartney's performance is also a massive reason why I put this song at number 9, because I can tell you that I've googled covers of this song. I've seen if there's any other covers made by other artists. You know, the Beatles are one of the most covered bands of all time, and still I can't find a single artist or, you know, person on the internet that can perform this song like Paul McCartney does. He was one of the most versatile performers of all time, and this type of song proves it. You know, the fact that in this album you have tracks like I'm Looking Through You, then you have Michelle, and then you have Drive My Car. You know, the versatility that he showcased in this album is remarkable, and that is the reason why the song finds itself at number 9. At number 8, we have the first single we'll be talking about in this video, and that is Day Tripper. The reasons as to why the song is so high, it's kind of complicated, because the instrumentation isn't all that interesting, and actually, at least in my opinion, it doesn't fall in line with a lot of the other sounds, or, you know, the sound palette of the album itself, which is the reason why I think it was chosen as a single and wasn't included on the album. The bass line is incredible, the vocals are amazing. Once again, the vocal harmonies between John, Paul, and George sound amazing, and there's a certain point in this album where they do a little crescendo thing like they did back in their first album in the song Twist and Shout, so it's like a little throwback. Also, the drumming in here is incredible. I would say the best out of the whole list. Ringo Starr was on point in this song. Apart from that, I don't really have anything else to say. It's just a really good tune. The vocals work really well with each other, and that's reason enough for me to bring it all the way up to number 8. At number 7, people are going to hate me for this, and they're probably going to say that I'm glazing McCartney way too much, but I'm going to put Michelle. I know that this song is very simple, and I've criticized other tracks in this list for doing the exact same thing. The difference is that this is probably one of the most sophisticated and elegant compositions McCartney ever did with the Beatles. The melody is beautiful, the lyrics are so romantic and passionate. I believe that his performance is also on point, once again showcasing his versatility. He was able to be tender, romantic, but also energetic and crazy, and I feel like that sort of contrast makes me enjoy the song even more when I'm listening to the album, because it gives me this feeling that I don't know what to expect in the next song. You know, they could do whatever, because it seems like they were able to do everything right. I don't really know if this song was inspired in his relationship with Jane Asher, and I don't really have a lot to say when it comes to the instrumentation of the track, because once again, it's a pretty simple acoustic ballad. You know, there's nothing too crazy going on in the instrumentation. There's nothing too crazy going on with the vocals either. You know, everything about the song is very simple. The only reason why it's so high up on the list is mainly because of the melody and Paul McCartney's performance. But in my opinion, it's so good that it's more than enough for me to bring it all the way up to number 7. I know that a lot of you will criticize me for it, but it's what it is. At number 6, we have a song that, just like McCartney's Michelle, it's very simple in terms of instrumentation, but it adds a layer of complexity in its lyrical concept and in the way that John Lennon performs the track, because we have the song Girl. Not only do I think the performance in this track is amazing, but I also believe this is one of the most important compositions by John Lennon, mainly because prior to this song, you do have other tracks where John Lennon deals with personal issues, like Nowhere Man in this same album, Help, I'm a Loser in the album Beatles for Sale. it's clear that John Lennon was no stranger to expressing his feelings with his songwriting ever since 1964. But in this song, it's different. It's not only the lyrics, it's not only the things that he's saying, it's also the way that he says it, the way he performs, the way that he portrays the feeling. And I feel like that tendency to use his voice and mannerisms that you use when you talk, like zizzing or accentuating certain parts of your speech, John Lennon uses that in his performance, and that kind of shaped the way he performed during the entirety of the late 60s and the 70s. Actually, Plastic Ono Band is one of the most influential albums in terms of performance of all time, and it all begun with John Lennon's performance of Girl, at least the way I see it. He wasn't only personal in the lyrics, but also personal in the way he performed the track. Also, when you look at how interesting it is, the fact that in this song he cries for this woman that he seems to imagine, a woman that's powerful, a woman that you can't resist, and then a year later he meets Yoko Ono. It's simply incredible, how after he met Yoko, the lyrics of this song gained purpose, like they gained meaning. It's a wonderful story, and it's the reason why I put it all the way up in number 6. But even though Girl seems to be the point where John Lennon perfected his performance style, how to infuse feelings into his performance, I believe that the existential and philosophical nature of the song Nowhere Man make it deserving of the 5th spot. Not only is the song amazing on its own, but it's also a really important point in the album, because Drive My Car is a good opener. It allowed the fans to see that the Beatles were still going on that pop rock Beatlemania-ish vibe. Norwegian Wood and Think For Yourself showed people that the band was going for a more interesting and complex instrumental palette, but it was Nowhere Man that showed the real nature of the album. The vocal harmonies in this song are the blueprint for how the rest of the album is going to sound like. It's also one of the biggest sources of inspiration for albums like Pet Sounds, people like the Kings and the Yardbirds, even though they themselves were the reason why this song was created in the first place. The Beatles were really interested in the way they mixed their vocals and the way they performed the track in such a way that the vocals seemed to blend with each other, instead of, you being able to pick out the vocal tracks and you're like, okay, John Lennon is singing the high notes, Paul McCartney is singing the middle tone, and George Harrison is singing the low notes. Instead, in this song, you don't really know who's singing what. Everything seems to be part of a wall of sound, that went on to inspire, once again, albums like Pet Sounds, which is considered to be one of the greatest albums of the 60s. The lyrics are the result of some sort of epiphany John Lennon had after trying LSD for the first time. It seems like after you do that drug, everything else seems to be so big and so massive and so much more important than yourself, so you feel like nothing, which is why the concept of a nowhere man that does nothing and inspired by nothing came to be in this song. It's a really interesting lyrical concept, and I feel like that's the reason why not only the fact that the tune is enjoyable and then the instrumentation is nice, really folky tune, because there's other songs in this list that probably have a better melody, there's probably other songs with a better instrumentation or a better use of harmonies, but this song is like a combination of all the different elements that make this album as great as it is. The only reason why it doesn't find itself higher is because, in my opinion, the songs that are above it were more important not only for the album and for the band as a whole, but also as individual songwriters too. So number 5, amazing song. At number 4, we have the other single we'll be talking about in this video, and that is We Can Work It Out by Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and George Harrison. All 3 of them contributed greatly to the writing of this song, although most of the writing was done by McCartney. The reason why I put this song so high up on the list, I know that a lot of you probably consider Nowhere Man to be a more important composition. The same thing can be said about Girl and Day Tripper, but for me, the nature of the lyrics in this song are so unintentionally prophetic that they elevate the overall listening experience. This is John Lennon and Paul McCartney predicting how the band's relationship was going to be in the future, with John Lennon pulling out, saying that life is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, and then you have McCartney trying to work out the situation and trying to make the band stick together. It's really, really, really interesting that 3 years before the band started to get deep into these issues that conflicted the band's relationship and made the whole of the recording sessions of the White Album and Abbey Road and the Get Back sessions be so tense and so awkward for the most part. Apart from that, I think this is also the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, that the band used a harmonium, so it showcases the band using new techniques and new instruments in the studio. And overall, yeah, this is just a really enjoyable track, and in my opinion, the nature of the lyrics and how they they predicted the future of the band is what makes the song so interesting to listen to. When I started making this list, I thought that it was going to be a little higher. I thought that it was going to be in the top 3 definitely, but seems I was wrong. Because at number 3, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be the most controversial placement on this entire list, we have If I Needed Someone by George Harrison. The reason why, it's quite simple. This is a song I've listened to the most by far out of this entire album. I love the guitar playing, how dreamy and beautiful it sounds. I love how, once again, the band uses the vocal harmonies to accentuate certain parts of the melody to elevate the listening experience, so George Harrison comes in during the first half of the verse and just sings by himself, and then the rest of the band joins in and makes a wall of voices that sounds so beautiful and kind of take you to this different dimension where everything is pretty and everything is really positive. Then there's the lyrics, which are beautiful. If I had to pick my favorite lyrics out of this entire album, I'm pretty sure I would go for this one. And it just feels like this was a really important moment for George Harrison, because even though a lot of people say that I Need You was the point where people started to see George Harrison as a massive songwriting force, in my opinion, it was in Rubber Soul with songs like Think For Yourself, which showcase an interesting side to the instrumentation of the band with the fuzz bass, and a lot of other elements in the songwriting. But also, I feel like If I Needed Someone, the potential the song had not only as a part of the album but also as a standalone track, is what made people see George Harrison and look forward to his compositions, and that may be the reason why in Revolver he has 3 songs instead of 2. It's just clear that in this album he was as talented in terms of songwriting as John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Obviously they had way more experience, and time would prove that they were way better overall because they managed to stay relevant in their solo careers, unlike George Harrison. But that's a different story for another video, hopefully someday. But back in 1965, I feel like this was the first time people looked at George and said, I want to listen to some more of your compositions, and I personally believe that If I Needed Someone was kind of like the main reason for that. So it falls to number 3, bronze medal. Well deserved. At number 2, we not only have one of the best songs in this entire album, but also one of the most interesting ones, actually the most interesting one, because we have Norwegian Wood. The reason why I feel like this song is so important for the band's catalog, it's because it was the first time the Beatles showed such a different type of instrumentation. George Harrison is using the sitar. The lyrics that John came up with for this song are very taboo, are very different from anything the Beatles had done before. And then Paul McCartney's backing vocals worked very differently from usual. They seem to offer a contrast to John's singing rather than just joining it. And I feel like that change in terms of sound and in terms of songwriting approach and in terms of techniques when recording the song too, because you can tell that John's voice sounds way cleaner, way more raw, and in your face kind of. That showed the people that this was going to be a very different album, and the fact that the song is found so early in the record, one of the first songs, is what made people realize, okay, this is not your conventional Beatles album, we're about to listen to something new. And actually, the first time I listened to Rubber Soul, I didn't really like this track. I was like confused because it was so different from everything I've heard before from the band that I was like, okay, what are you gonna do with this? When after I listened to the entirety of Rubber Soul, I was able to appreciate the change of pace that Norwegian Wood offered. There's also the little story behind this song, being the fact that Bob Dylan had a little back and forth with the Beatles thanks to this song. Actually, this song inspired Bob Dylan to write Fourth Time Around in his album Blonde on Blonde with a similar, lyrical concept. I recommend for you guys to check out that story because it's really interesting. I'm not going to get into it because I don't really want this video to be that long, but yeah, really important song, amazing composition by John Lennon, instrumental contributions by George Harrison with the sitar, and incredible backing vocals by Paul McCartney. Incredible track. But it's not number 1, because number 1 is one of the most significant songs in the band's discography, which is weird because in an album that's praised for being such a change of pace in terms of songwriting, in terms of instrumentation, for being the first experimental Beatles album, an album that inspired so many people, the song that finds itself at number 1 is not exactly the most complex or the most interesting composition in the album, because at number 1 I have In My Life. Every single list ranking the songs from Rubber Soul is gonna have In My Life as number one, you know, because this song is so meaningful to a lot of us fans, because it seems like this is a song written by a totally different band. You know, the versatility that the Beatles offered in this album doesn't really hit you until you listen to this song. The Baroque elements like the piano solo that George Martin provided for this album, the beautiful lyrics that are so deep and so emotional, and that show a side of John Lennon that's so tender and it's so sensitive, you know. The simple but beautiful guitar playing that manages to fill in the quiet moments of the song. There's also the incredible backing vocals by Paul McCartney. You know, Paul McCartney as a backing vocalist is as amazing as Paul McCartney as a lead vocalist, and this song is the perfect example of it. But overall, I think it's just a feeling of emotion and sadness and bittersweet happiness that the song offers that make it such a special track, you know. And if I had to pick the song that describes the feeling of being a Beatles fan, knowing how bitter everything turned in the late 60s, I would say that In My Life is a perfect example of that. Because before this album, you had a band of teenagers that was making music that, you know, was constantly being played on radio, is considered mainstream, or was considered mainstream back then. And after this album, you have probably the biggest creative outbursts in the history of music. The instrumentations tend to be really complex. The lyrics tend to be kind of abstract, referencing drugs, referencing problems, relationship, politics, you know. And it feels like this song, you know, In My Life, was a calm before the storm that the late 60s were for the Beatles. And that is the reason why it finds itself at number one of my favorite songs by the band, and one of the most beautiful compositions John Lennon ever wrote. However, that is only my personal opinion. As I said in the beginning of the video, I have to say that I had a lot of fun making this list. You know, we've already done it before with Revolver, with Sgt. Pepper's, and Let It Be, but in those albums it was way easier because there's clear highlights. You know, there's clear moments where the genius of the band was peeking through a lot more than in other songs. And Let It Be, ranking Let It Be above For Your Blue, for example, or maybe Across the Universe above One After 909, is very simple. You don't really need to think about it too much. But in here, even the song at number 14 is kind of on the same level of quality as the song at number 5. You know, that's how good this album is in terms of consistency. The level of quality seems to be the same no matter at what point in the album you're at, except for you know, the Ringo Starr song. So it was really complicated, but that's what makes it fun for me. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. Also, if you want me to talk about any other topics related to music, if you want me to check out a song, album, or artist, you can go ahead and leave it down below as well, and I'll make sure to read it and fulfill your request as soon as I can. Once again, I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I hope that I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.